communities of interest to ensure priorities are appropriate and approaches are sound. It will also encourage members of the wider community to more actively contribute to service delivery improvements, policy and program development, and to make progress in areas that rely more on public choices than on government interventions, such as saving water and obesity levels. Government will need to be open to feedback and actively engage with communities about decisions that concern the services to be provided, how they are funded, and remain open to new ways of providing services. If the trust of citizens is a prerequisite to the efficient functioning of government, we need to address the critical challenge of increasing transparency in how decisions are made and implemented by paving new ways to increase citizen and stakeholder participation and engagement. Stakeholder engagement, a common activity across government, is a key component in effective service delivery. But I need to emphasise that it's not an exercise in simply managing stakeholder expectations. I'd have to say governments have become expert in stakeholder management. I'm as guilty as the next senior public service manager of past laziness in the identification of stakeholders around a given issue. I'd often fall back on the old litany of the usual suspects. Who do we consult? Well, we'll go to the BCA, the AI Group, the ACCI and the ACTU. And then very attentive to the cosmetics of engagement while seeking to control, manage or minimise their actual impact. There's a much more productive way to conceptualise stakeholder engagement by breaking it down into 5 broad categories of participatory approaches viewed along a continuum, starting with low-level engagement and leading to high-level partnering characterised by shared ownership and accountability. The participatory approaches on this engagement continuum can be defined as follows. Networking, a low level of engagement characterised by information exchange about strategies and activities. Coordination, structured consultation on strategies or activities to influence outcomes. Cooperation, formal involvement in the development of outcomes. Collaboration, which is similar to cooperation except the phase signals changes in the way stakeholders behave when they work together. And finally, partnering, sharing accountability for the product and in the achievement of the goals set. Importantly, the model of the engagement continuum I've described imposes a discipline by requiring a forensic assessment of the exact relationship proposed for each stakeholder group and the level of reciprocity that can be expected from the government in that relationship. Too often it's my experience that government defaults to the language of partnership and thereby sets expectations around that promised engagement when something very different is intended. A much more diligent and honest approach avoids pain on both sides by recognising that different levels of participation is actually okay and are more or less desirable depending upon the characteristics of the policy process and the goals being pursued. In addition, each participatory approach will require a different design using a new combination of tools and methodologies, much like the way that each participatory initiative contains a unique mix of people and institutions. To return to rules and process fixation, misguided attempts to strictly standardise and replicate protocols in line with conventional scientific practice can also undermine the participatory process. To illustrate, there is a view that some of the frameworks that were very successfully applied to the management of the multitude of projects that were undertaken in the lead up to the Sydney Olympic Games and which were then retained post-Olympics have had some longer-term unintended consequences. The nature of the Sydney Olympic Games projects, particularly in terms of arrangements like public-private partnerships, their scale in terms of the magnitude of the work required, size in terms of budget and other necessary resourcing, and the tight delivery timeframes, together with the public scrutiny they received, demanded a quite specific and necessarily rigorous response in terms of the probity frameworks that were applied. However, these highly engineered probity frameworks continue to be used today as a one-size-fits-all approach to risk management. Rather than pursue good outcomes, is it possible that the application of the pre-existing probity frameworks, through no better reason than a preoccupation with process, has created barriers to the fomenting of new ideas, stifled opportunity for innovation and resulted in reluctance on the part of the business community to effectively engage with the public sector and vice versa. Those from outside government who have confronted some of our approaches to unsolicited infrastructure proposals and tendering generally might be forgiven for so thinking. It's important to add that I'm not advocating the dismantling of probity frameworks or the casting aside of risk management methodologies, but rather that they be fit for purpose, taking account of the value, complexity and sensitivity of whatever the initiative or project being pursued. We should be reminded that the goal of risk management is not the total elimination of risk, but an approach aimed at effectively identifying and assessing risk with a view to mitigating their potential impact. Risk management frameworks, much like engagement strategies, need to be developed so that they are fit for purpose. Sir David Normington, recently appointed in the UK to oversee both public appointments and the Civil Service Code and recruitment, suggests when referring to the process-driven, too complex, over-regulated and too prescribed and specific recruitment code of practice that it is time for people to stop leaning on the rules. As if you are concentrating on stopping things, you tend to forget that you are also there to enable. He also makes the point in this context that people need to start to engage their brains. I would like to think this means looking for new ideas that work, and if this also means providing the public service with the authority or permission, the competence and the tools to align probity and risk requirements with legitimate public service innovation and experimentation, then so be it. Participation, as I've outlined, allows the community opportunity to contribute ideas and expertise to the solving of problems. Participation in all of its forms improves the effectiveness of government by encouraging partnerships and cooperation within and across levels of government and between the government and private institutions. The concepts of co-production, co-creation and market design have evolved from a similar footing. They each involve taking a citizen-centric approach to policy development and program delivery. It's no longer adequate for government to be just the rule setter and service provider. Government needs a restless, value-seeking imagination that constantly searches out ways to create public value. As you will have heard yesterday, and as no doubt you will hear later today, co-production is an active but voluntary behaviour by a citizen which is conjoint with government activity and which creates value in the form of outputs or outcomes. Support for co-production processes is central to the design policies that encourage, enable or educate citizens to make choices that contribute to wider public goals. Importantly, co-production is not about offloading the delivery of services to the community to reduce spending. Rather, it is defined by joint development of policy and service delivery to realise a shared strategic outcome, the community as co-architects in the design of policies and programs that concern them and their resources, citizen participation and involvement in government activities, and collaboration between the state and the citizen in the production of socially desired outcomes. The aim is to mobilise the additional productive capabilities of citizens to complement service delivery in areas of public concern. Volunteers of the Rural Fire Service produce emergency responses, but they also assist or co-produce with respect to educating property owners of the need to undertake fire prevention or mitigation work. Citizens sorting their household waste to facilitate recycling are also engaged in co-production. Market design builds further on the principles of co-production in that it adds elements of devolved government, where funding is provided to non-government entities for goods or services, and co-regulation, where the regulatory role is shared between government and industry. Introducing these concepts where we must engage with the citizen, apply citizen-centric research and design thinking can be challenging. According to Christian Basson of Denmark's Mind Lab, from whom you heard yesterday, 3 myths in particular characterise the involvement of citizens in these types of processes. First, fear of citizen dictators. By involving citizens or business representatives explicitly, we as public servants might be devolving our decision-making authority. The purpose of involvement is not to ask citizens which ideas they prefer, but to explore which ideas are likely to work. Secondly, citizen involvement requires too many resources. Won't it take too long, and won't it be too expensive? Energy and resources are necessary for citizen involvement, but consider the alternative. What does it cost to develop expert solutions behind a desk, roll them out, and then realise, based on citizen complaints, rising service costs and political fallout, that the solution doesn't work? Citizen involvement is a cost-effective means of ensuring that new solutions really do meet users' needs and that they hit the target in terms of service improvements and better outcomes. Third, citizen involvement creates unrealistic expectations. Now that we've generated these new ideas together, don't citizens expect something to happen? Most citizens and business owners understand that in a political system, and especially in a democracy, there is no guarantee that just because a group of public servants think that an idea is a good one, it will be judged so by senior management or by politicians. It's therefore necessary to clarify expectations, that we would take the process and their input seriously and report to them what, if any, ideas we would continue to work on. We should all be encouraged in this endeavour, as it is evident to me that there's an enormous appetite for engagement in the business and non-government sectors, and critically, a real and genuine willingness to make a contribution to New South Wales's enhanced performance. This was made very clear to me soon after commencing my role here in New South Wales, when, at the invitation of former Premier Nick Greiner, I was invited to an informal gathering of 20 or so influential people drawn from the business world, from the university community and cultural sectors, and indeed some past mandarins from the venerable New South Wales bureaucracy. They shared with me their aspirations for New South Wales, their frustration at the generally closed and introverted nature of the public sector, and their enthusiasm to be involved in what they characterised as the rejuvenation of the state. In considering how the public service can push through this open door and take systematic advantage of the knowledge and experience held by those I met and others from outside government, I'm working with Dr. Michael Spence, the Vice-Chancellor at the University of Sydney, to convene a forum that brings together senior public servants, academics, business and community leaders to talk about opening lines of community engagement, or engagement generally, and exploring ideas for unleashing the potential of our external partners, using the term in its proper sense. From this will emerge a specific course of action for how the public service will move from introversion to extroversion, albeit modest and appropriate. We have permission from the government to engage. It is now up to us to make it happen. Finally, I would like to briefly return to the theme of customer centricity and innovation. Recognising the centrality of the service delivery challenges faced by government, the Premier today will announce the establishment of an ANZSOG Chair of Public Service Delivery based at the Australian School of Business at the University of New South Wales. The inaugural chair is in the room, Mr. Gary Sturges, who until recently was Executive Director of the Serco Institute, a London-based think tank specialising in the design and management of public service markets. He was also previously Director General of the New South Wales Cabinet Office. The Chair will provide the New South Wales Government with strategic, research-based expertise on the innovations and reforms necessary to improve service delivery. The range of issues will include service design, commissioning of public services, frontline service delivery, diversity in service provision, and ways of increasing co-production. The Premier and I, together with ANZSOG and UNSW, are delighted to have Gary on board as our resident internationally acclaimed expert on public service delivery. To finally conclude, it's a tautology. I'm not so naive as to believe that the phrase "I'm from the government and I'm here to help" will ever again be accepted at face value. But I am confident that initiatives such as the Public Service Commission, Infrastructure New South Wales, the Customer Service Commission, the External Leaders Engagement Exercise and the new ANZSOG Chair will go some considerable way to creating the foundations on which that trust can be built. To underscore these initiatives, I'll leave you with my parting thought. Perhaps